This is a true story, or at least it began as one. I'm writing it down because I don't think I'll last much longer. It started 4 months ago when I moved into a small town in Vermont called Munnins Hollow. You won't find it on most maps, and for good reason. The locals don't encourage visitors, and the few that pass through rarely stay. But I stayed. I stayed because the house was cheap. Too cheap, in fact. It was a quiet, 2-story home on the edge of a patch of pine woods. The listing described it as old, creaky, and quaint. A faded picture showed a narrow staircase, ivy crawling up the porch, and a second-floor window with cracked lace curtains and what looked like the outline of someone behind the glass. I ignored that detail at the time. I shouldn't have. I was recovering from a breakup, some financial trouble, and the general existential drift of my 30s. The listing had shown up in a forum. I'd been browsing about remote living, and I contacted the owner the same day. Her name was Miss Renavale. Elderly, sharp-voiced, and clearly eager to be rid of the place. "I only ask one thing," she said as she handed me the keys outside the property. "Don't sleep in the room at the end of the hall. Lock it and leave it locked." I must have raised an eyebrow. She added, "People say the door unlocks itself. If it does, you tell me and I'll come get you. No charge. Just don't go in. Promise me." I did. Stupidly. I thought it was superstition, some old folk tale. Maybe a bat problem. Or mold. That kind of thing. But it was something else. Something worse. The first week passed quietly. The house creaked often but held a strange, still peace, like a place forgotten by time. My days were filled with freelance work and walks in the woods. My nights were long but uneventful. Until the third night. That's when I first heard the footsteps. They came from the upstairs hallway, always around 3:12 a.m., soft, deliberate footsteps. Not pacing, just a single pass from one end of the hallway to the other. Then silence. When I'd open my door and peer out, the hallway would be empty. I assumed it was the house settling, or a squirrel in the walls. But on the 7th night, I found something that changed that. They appeared at the end of my bed. Old leather shoes, worn down to the sole, with cracked heels and faded black laces. They looked like something a man might have worn in the 1940s, sturdy, utilitarian, and wrong in their placement. I hadn't put them there. They hadn't been in the house when I moved in. I searched the closets, the attic, even the crawl space. Nothing. That night, I tossed them outside into the garbage. The next morning, they were back, in the same place, perfectly aligned, toes pointing toward me at the end of the bed. I finally went upstairs to check the forbidden room. The lock was still latched, but the doorknob felt warm to the touch, unsettlingly warm, like someone had just been holding it from the other side. I listened. Nothing. No breathing, no shuffling. Just a strange pressure, like the air was thicker around the door. I should have walked away. Instead, I leaned closer and whispered, stupidly, "Hello." Something whispered back, not in words, in breath. A long exhale, like someone had pressed their lips to the keyhole and sighed directly into my ear. I jumped back, nearly falling down the stairs. The shoes were waiting at the bottom. It happened on the 10th night. I woke in the dark to a soft, rhythmic creaking. I sat up. The room was still, but there was a figure standing at the end of the bed. A man, not fully formed, more like the impression of one. His head was bowed, his posture slouched. His shoulders heaved gently, like he was crying, or laughing. I couldn't tell. The only thing I could see clearly was his feet. He was wearing the shoes, the same cracked leather shoes. I tried to scream, but no sound came. I tried to move, but my limbs were locked. Then he looked up. His face was a blur. Hollow eyes, no mouth. Just skin, smooth and featureless. He reached for my foot. I passed out. I called Renavale the next day. She arrived that afternoon, eyes narrowed, wearing gloves despite the summer heat. She didn't ask what I saw. She didn't need to. She only asked, "Did you go inside the room?" "No," I said, "but something's coming out." She nodded slowly, then said something that chilled me. "You're already part of the house." That's how it begins. I demanded answers. She gave me pieces. The house, she explained, belonged to her uncle, a man named Clive Vale, who'd served as a caretaker for a nearby estate after returning from the war. He moved into this home in 1949. Then he changed. He stopped talking, stopped eating, slept during the day, and paced the upstairs hallway at night, always wearing the same worn leather shoes. He was found dead in the locked room at the end of the hall in 1951, face down, barefoot. The shoes were missing. They never found them. Until now. Since her visit, things have worsened. Dusk arrives earlier each day, even when the sun is still out. The house grows cold by 5 p.m., no matter the weather. And every night, the figure stands at the end of the bed. Some nights he reaches. Other nights he just watches. But he never leaves. The worst part? The shoes are starting to move during the day. I left them in the hallway one morning. 10 minutes later, they were inside the bathroom, facing the mirror. Yesterday, I found them in the attic, side by side, next to a pair of smaller children's shoes. I live alone. Last night, I heard a scraping from inside the wall beside my bed. I pressed my ear against it. Something was scratching, methodically like it was writing. I cut a hole in the drywall. Inside, on the wood beam, scratched with what looked like a nail, were 3 words. "Make room. Soon." I sealed the hole. Burned sage. Left all the lights on. Didn't sleep. At 3:12 a.m., the lights died, and the shoes were at the end of the bed. I tried moving out. I packed my things. I left the house. I got as far as the main road. But when I opened my car door, the shoes were on the driver's seat. I left the house at 10 a.m. sharp the day after I found the words, "Make room." Soon, carved into the wall. I didn't pack much, just a duffel, my laptop, some clothes. I didn't even bother turning off the lights. I just bolted. As I drove, I kept my eyes glued to the rearview mirror, expecting to see something following me, footsteps echoing from nowhere, or the man with no face. Nothing. I reached the highway by noon. That's when I started to relax. The town was behind me, and so was the house. I stopped at a rest stop, got a coffee, and opened my car door. They were there. The same cracked leather shoes, sitting side by side on the driver's seat. Dry as bone, even though it had started to drizzle. My keys were inside one of them. My phone, dead, even though it had been fully charged. I stood there shaking, coffee soaking through my jacket, and realized I'd never really left. When I finally returned, half by choice, half because I had nowhere else to go, I noticed something strange about the road into Munnins Hollow. It didn't match any GPS route. When I tried to track my movements, the app showed me circling in place near a logging road miles outside town. Worse, every time I tried to call someone, even just to hear a human voice, the line would go dead. Or worse, I'd hear static, then a long, dragging sound, like someone pulling something heavy across a wooden floor. Sometimes it would whisper my name, but not my full name, only my first. Just like he had that night, he reached for my foot. There's a crawl space above the stairwell with a square wooden door, painted the same off-white as the ceiling. I hadn't noticed it before. It blended into the plaster perfectly. But after the shoes appeared in the attic, I felt drawn to it. It was unlocked. I had to use a stepladder to reach it. Inside was a narrow crawl space filled with dust and old cloth bundles. One of the bundles moved. I froze. Then something rolled out. Slowly, carefully. A child's shoe. Tiny, cracked, with faded red stitching. There was a piece of paper inside, yellowed and brittle, torn along the edge. Written in faded ink, "Do not answer when it knocks." It learned your voice. I backed away and shut the crawlspace door. Behind me, I heard the faint sound of someone knocking from inside the wall. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I didn't answer. That night, I tore the house apart. I needed answers. Miss Vale had gone silent. Her phone only buzzed now, sending me to voicemail. When I drove by her house, the windows were covered and the porch was empty. A neighbor told me she had gone out of town, but couldn't say when or where. I found the diary in a false back of a drawer in the upstairs hallway. It belonged to a woman named Celia Torrance. Entries dated between 1950 and 1953, all in neat cursive. Some excerpts. Clive is worse. He won't eat. He paces. He says the shoes talk when the lights are out. He started sleeping in a room at the end of the hall. Says it's safer that way. Safer for whom? The sound came again last night, low, scraping, followed by laughter that didn't match any human throat. The boy's shoes moved. They were next to my bed this morning, toes pointed in. I burned them. I swear I did. The last entry chilled me. I saw the face for the first time, or the lack of one, and now it knows I know. I did as Rena instructed. I kept the room locked until the 13th night. That's when I heard the whisper again, soft, like breath pressed against my ear through the wall. Only this time it said, "Let me in." I sat against the door, hand gripping the key, not turning it. I said, "What do you want?" It whispered, "I want my shoes." The lock began to turn on its own. I jammed a screwdriver into the keyhole and broke the internal mechanism. The knob seized. Silence returned. I sat there until sunrise, clutching the diary to my chest. 3 nights later, I found another note. It was lying on my pillow when I woke up. No sign of how it got there. No window open. No door unlocked. Written in blocky letters, as if from a child learning to write. If you sleep, it walks inside. I stayed awake for 3 straight nights after that. My eyes burned. My hands shook. I started hallucinating. I saw the man standing in the mirror, in the reflection of my coffee, in the window across the room. I blinked, and he'd be gone. The only consistent thing? The shoes. Always at the end of the bed, no matter where I put them. 2 nights ago, I heard something moving beneath the floorboards of my bedroom. It wasn't rats. It wasn't plumbing. It was footsteps, measured, dragging, pacing back and forth below me. I pried up one of the floorboards the next morning. Underneath, I found a small box wrapped in newspaper. Inside was another shoe, this one newer, almost untouched. But on the insole, someone had written in blood-red ink, "He needs a pair." I put the board back and sealed it with nails. That night, the second shoe appeared beside the first one at the end of the bed. Perfectly matched. I found newspaper clippings in the attic, buried in a cardboard box behind insulation. 1953. House fire on Hill Road, contained before spreading. Believed to be arson. Owner found in catatonic state. 1959. Teen missing after spending night in vacant Vale property. Police find signs of struggle. No forced entry. 1972. Pastor warns against local cursed house. Cites demonic presence. They tried. Many times. But the house won't go. It won't let go. Now, the sun barely crests the hill before shadows stretch across the house. It's not just dusk. It's something pretending to be dusk. An early twilight that presses against the windows like a thick fog. I haven't seen a bird or animal in days. The trees outside sway when there's no wind. Last night, I walked into the living room and found muddy footprints leading up to the wall. I follow them. They stop beneath a family photo. But it wasn't the photo I remember hanging. In the frame was a picture of me, sitting in bed, staring at the shoes. Taken from the foot of the bed. I no longer sleep. I no longer dream. I only wait. Because the house is awake now, and it knows my name. The door at the end of the hall was always locked. I had made sure of it, but on the 17th night, I found it ajar. I hadn't unlocked it. I hadn't even approached it since the incident with the whisper. Yet there it was, slightly open, revealing a sliver of darkness within. I stood frozen, heart pounding, as a cold draft seeped from the gap. The air smelled of damp earth and decay. I pushed the door open. The room was empty. No furniture. No windows. Just four walls and a floor covered in dust. But in the center, perfectly aligned, were the shoes. Waiting, I installed a mirror in my bedroom, hoping to bring some light into the space. But the mirror didn't reflect me. It showed the room, bed, walls, door, but not me. Instead, it reflected the man, standing at the end of the bed, wearing the shoes. His face was still a blur, but his eyes were clearer now, dark voids that seemed to pull me in. I turned away, but the image lingered in my mind. When I looked back, the mirror was shattered. The whispers have become voices. They speak in unison, chanting a name I don't recognize. Clive, over and over. Sometimes they laugh. Other times they scream. But always they call for Clive. I asked Miss Vale about it. She said Clive was her uncle, the original owner of the house. He disappeared in 1951. They never found his body, only the shoes. I found another journal, hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the forbidden room. It belonged to Celia Torrance. Her entries grew more frantic over time. Clive is gone. The house is hungry. It wants more. The shoes move on their own. They follow me. I can't leave. The house won't let me. Her final entry was a single sentence. I am the house now. The house is alive. It breathes. The walls pulse softly in and out like lungs. The floorboards creak in rhythm with the breaths. At night, the house whispers to me. It tells me secrets, terrible secrets. I can't repeat them. I won't, but they haunt me. No matter where I go, the shoes follow. I left them in the woods. They returned. I burned them. They reappeared. I buried them. They dug themselves out. Now, they move on their own. I hear them at night, shuffling across the floor, getting closer. I don't know how much longer I can endure this. The house is consuming me. Piece by piece, I feel in my bones, in my mind. Soon, I will be part of it. Just like Clive, just like Celia, just like the others. There are doors in this house that never existed before. I open one, and it leads to a place that should not be. The house is no longer a structure. It is a memory of pain, a creature made of creaks and shadows. And it's remembering me. I awoke to silence, not the absence of noise, but the presence of something listening. When I tried to leave the bedroom, the door was gone. Not locked, gone. Replaced by seamless wallpaper, patterned with faded roses that hadn't been there before. I touched it, pressed against it. My fingers sank into it like old flesh. The wall pulsed faintly beneath my palm. I didn't scream. Not because I was calm, but because I was afraid screaming would let it know I was awake. And I think the house wanted me to scream. I found the staircase only when I stopped looking. It was behind the kitchen pantry, behind a section of the wall that felt softer than it should. The stairs descended into darkness. At the bottom, the floor was slick with something wet. There was no light, but somehow I saw him. The man in the shoes. He was standing in the far corner, back turned, head tilted, as though listening to something only he could hear. Then, without moving his feet, he slid closer across the floor, soundless, graceful. I ran, but when I returned to the kitchen, the pantry was brick, as if the stairs had never been there at all. The landline has begun to ring every night at exactly 3:12 a.m. I picked up once. Only once. There was a voice, wet and gurgling, barely above a whisper. It said, "He's at the end of the bed again. He knows her name now." Then the line went dead. But the phone never stops ringing after that, even unplugged. I went through an old box of photos in the attic. They were of the house, dated back to the 1940s, when it was new. In every photo, no matter the angle or time of day, the same man stood in the background, always in the same spot, always wearing the same worn shoes, even in photos taken decades apart, even in one that showed the empty attic. He was still there behind the photographer, looking directly at me. I returned to Miss Vale, desperate for answers. She seemed older, exhausted, like the house had started feeding on her too. She told me she used to hear the whispers, that the house had shown her things, memories that weren't hers, places that didn't exist until she believed in them. I asked about Clive again. She looked through me and whispered, "He opened the wrong door, the one that leads down." Then she stood up and told me never to come back. She closed her door, and I haven't seen her since. My bed began to sag in the middle, like something was pulling it downward. At first, I thought it was the frame. Then, one night, I woke up to find it had sunk by nearly 2 feet. The mattress felt like liquid, and beneath it, I could hear something. Breathing. Not like lungs, more like a furnace. Something vast and ancient and starving. I tried to move, but I was pinned, held there by invisible hands. Then the whisper came again, right next to my ear. "Why are you in my bed?" They're walking above me now, but the house only has 2 stories, unless something's added another. I hear chairs being dragged, floorboards creaking under heavy weight, thuds like someone jumping. Sometimes they pause directly above my bed. Sometimes I swear I hear them crawl. I placed a ladder against the attic hatch and climbed up. But when I opened it, there was no attic anymore. Only blackness. And something breathed out of it, hot and wet and alive. One night, I found writing in the dust on the windowsill. It wasn't there before. It read, "We remember our names." Then the next night, "And yours is next." Then the next, Clive, Celia, Thomas, Sarah. Each night, a new name appeared, until the 5th night. Then it simply said, "Now you." They're no longer by the bed. I found them in the bathtub this morning, filled with water. I drained the tub, dried them off, and locked them in a closet downstairs. By the time I got back to my room, they were under the bed again, facing outward, like someone had just stepped out of them. In the mirror, I can see him standing behind me. Even when I turn around, he remains visible only in the reflection, His face is no longer a blur. It's mine, but older, hollow, with eyes like dry wells. And when he opens his mouth, I hear the whisper again. You've already lived this. You just forgot. I tried to leave. I tried to forget. But the house remembers. And now so do I. I left the house. I drove for hours, determined never to return. But the road twisted unnaturally, leading me back. The town sign read, "Welcome to Munnins Hollow." I never turned around. I smashed every mirror in the house. Yet reflections persisted, in windows, in puddles, in the gleam of a doorknob. Each showed me older, more haggard, until I saw myself as the man in the shoes. The basement door stood open. I descended, each step echoing with whispers. At the bottom, a room awaited filled with shoes, hundreds, maybe thousands. Each pair belonged to someone the house had claimed. At the center stood the man, faceless, holding a pair identical to mine. He offered them to me. I took the shoes. As I wore them, memories flooded back of lives lived in this house, of horrors endured. I was not the first. I would not be the last. Now I sit at the end of the bed, watching, waiting. The house breathes with me. It remembers. And soon, someone new will arrive. The cycle continues.